we're here to discuss Nostr funding for devs, but also more generally just funding FOSS efforts, because even after last few decades have shown what kind of impact FOSS has, funding is still an issue. And this is a great panel in a sense that I expect a lot of opposing views, you know, a lot of discussions.
Maybe. Why would that happen? That's going to happen.
Huh? You'll surprise me, you two? We'll see. But yeah, we're here just to chat for the next 45 minutes about FOSS funding, go over amazing things that have happened since Nostrica, and just dive into it. Who should open? NBK, maybe you, board member at OpenSats.
Yeah, so OpenSats, for people that don't know, is a 501c3 funding organization for open source, mostly open source development, right? And it's for both Bitcoin and Nostr. We have $5 million for each of them as a budget right now, and we are experimenting with this sort of committee format where we have a board member that approves things, but really trying to push this idea of a community of peers, so people who are extremely active on a space to be the people who really have a better sense and to sort of like give their takes there. It's we had Gigi join us, and he's plowing through these things and making it happen. It's really cool. Fiatjaf is part of the committee. Figure out how we can get the guy who was the CEO of Nostr to participate. Good morning, Fiatjaf. So that's working great.
That's the introduction. And then Ben, you're one of the most well-known FOSS advocates in Bitcoin, forever FOSS, but also leading LMBits. How would you present your FOSS efforts? And
I think it's an interesting point on funding. OpenSat's doing an amazing job freeing up people so they can work solely on Bitcoin and Nostr. And honestly, when you free up a mind so it can concentrate entirely upon this thing, that's really powerful. Because flipping from working as a contractor or working in a normal job, a fiat job, whatever, and then having to flip to contributing in the evenings is very hard for people. And it's my hat's comes completely off to those people who are able to do that, because I find it very hard to flip between different jobs and tasks. Gigi joining as well, because we got an OpenStats grant for LMBits, which we've done some great things. We've made some bounties, I was very impressed with Gigi. We actually had quite a heated debate.
Everybody has a heated debate with Gigi. I was trying to have dinner with Gigi, and we had a heated debate over probably the fork.
Yeah, we had a heated debate in Oslo, and then I was like, oh man, that's going to ruin my chances to get this OpenStats grant. And then it was a week later, I got this lovely email from Gigi saying, oh, LMBits is such a great project, and we're so happy to be able to support the project and things. And I was like, okay, great. There really is no. It's
designed so no single board member can sort of have a strong opinion that be the opinion.
Yeah, and I think he's professional enough as well to see beyond that as well, which I was very impressed with.
No, just kidding. Yes,
but free and open source software. So if you look, there's some great videos back from the mid '90s of Linus Torvalds, and my man Alan Cox actually lives in Swansea, where I'm from, and they're working on Linux. And the reason Alan Cox is working on it, because that's the first, Swansea University was the first place they ran Linux on a busy server. So it was the first, it was the point where they realized people were actually using this thing and they should make a stable version. So Alan Cox maintained the first stable version of Linux. And there's this great video of them, and it's like some tech supplement for some news article thing, news show. And in it, these two people living in very modest houses, like Alan Cox is in a small fisherman's cottage in Swansea, and then Linus Torvalds is in a very modest house in California, when you could afford a house, and even a modest house in California. And the context is that Microsoft and Apple are terrified of these two underpaid developers working mostly for free, developing this free and open source software. So, but over time, of course, they had to adapt their business models So they became free and open source contributors. Microsoft became free and open source contributors. And I think that's how it works with Bitcoin, for example. Like, I can't imagine it's going to be this bloody revolution where we suddenly switch to a Bitcoin standard. It would just be that banks and things will start having to adopt this amazing technology stack. So it's great that we have these grants and ways of developers, free and open source developers, being able to get paid. But traditionally, free and open source has just won through being... it's just better. It's a better system. Like, people are underpaid, and it's a slow burner, and it takes a long time for that, free and open source UI to actually become functional because they haven't got the focus groups and all the research budgets which a big proprietary company might have. But we get there in the end because it's superior.
It's passion also, and
yeah, absolutely. So, like, can you imagine like a proprietary conference over a proprietary protocol or a piece of software with this much enthusiasm?
Salesforce. They have it in Las Vegas.
Yeah, but it's like this. It's a bunch of people in suits who are paid to be there.
Yeah, he's kidding. But two things that you said, like, that I'm going to do in my introduction is you mentioned Gigi, passionate debates, over dinner, over ruining your chances to get a grant, but then surprise, surprise. No, I mean, that's first point. Big point for me, that whenever I talk to people that are looking to get into open source, I always say, build reputation, not compensation, because the biggest reward that you get in open source is just getting to interact with people like this, and it's not that, I always agree with NVK, I always agree with Ben, but I respect them so much, and that's also what drives us forward. So that's the biggest thing that I always recommend if you're looking to join FOSS movement. Like, look who are the people that you truly respect and want to work with, and that's the path. And
there is I was reflecting over this recently, and having funds, right? Essentially funding all this open source people through philanthropy. Comes with an immense responsibility that I don't think a lot of people think about this. Because, see, you're interfering with the free market, right, when you're coming into this philanthropy. Maybe somebody out there is creating a little company around that, right? And you come in and you give somebody essentially free money, right, to go build that, and you just killed that little company. Maybe that little company wasn't meant to exist because it was able to just be killed by that. But it's just an interesting dynamic that I think it should be more sort of reflected on when you're are you maybe causing harm when you're funding a certain project because it could be sort of sucking the oxygen on things that could be independent?
I would say that it's computer science. It needs to be free and open source. And if they want to build a company around the project they're doing, then great. But I think that morally, a free and open source project trumps a proprietary closed source.
Here is the thing, doing company, paid product, it takes a different set of skills than doing the same size open source project that's funded by grants. It plays to different strengths.
It does. It absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that's kind of the thinking, because when I do see, my second point would be community, but for people that thrive on open source work, these are people that have completely different set of skills.
Most of them are unhireable.
Yeah,
in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. But that's also if you're trying to make it in a for-profit company, you need to be way more political.
Yep.
And you need to have those political skills compared to if you're an open source project where you're only evaluated on the basis of your merit and your contributions.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main issue is that until we had Bitcoin, we never really had a true open protocol that is permissionless, right? Because the internet is permissioned, right? Everything else is really permissioned, and we had Linux developed and then FANG, right? So Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google came in, and they're the biggest beneficiaries of open source. They make all the money out of Linux, right? Mostly because the internet is permissioned, right? So there's a massive barrier of entry for you to sort of run your ISP or do other things. Bitcoin did change the dynamic, and Nostr subsequently really sort of did that too, where you have full access to the protocol. So you don't need to have that scale in order to monetize open source. But it's really nice to have the push of granting, of charity, right? It's sort of like bootstrapping of these people so they can actually focus on this. Because we're running out of time. Right, it feels it, right? Like the state is coming, winter is coming, and like they really want us to stop talking to each other without their permission. So being able to bootstrap all this is very important.
I have the same feeling of urgency, and I don't know, sometimes I think with the Bitcoiners it kind of gets a little bit lost and they feel that, oh no, it's fine, it works for me as it is now, but I do feel that the world's going to need the solution ready and workable sooner rather than later. But I think that there is a natural self-correcting mechanism when it comes to proprietary for-profit activities and nurturing a free and open source project. So there's been plenty of great free and open source projects which have then gone on to create a company and a for-profit arm to help support the free and open source project. And so often, that doesn't happen less so much now because there's good examples of it failing utterly.
Well, they get captured, right? It's like Mozilla.
So that before it was there would be, okay, so now you're going to have an enterprise version of the software, which is paid, and you're going to have a community version. So you're going to have a good version of the software and a shit version, which isn't supported. Whereas we've got examples now like WordPress. LMBits very much is like the WordPress for Bitcoin for your node. So we look at WordPress as an example of having a company and then also having a software project which is very successful and has got a lot of very enthused free and open source developers. And the trick is just to not corrupt or try and take control over the free and open source project. You offer services on top of it, so like being able to spin up a WordPress on WordPress.com, for example, or WordPress managing the plugin app store. And then that's how Automatic, the company which owns WordPress, is a $7.5 billion company. It's not a small company. And it still manages to keep that very successful and enthused and happy free and open source development community as well.
I think like one thing that is very important is I think we sometimes do like a disservice to people working in open source by like not encouraging them to find a path to monetization, right? Like do work on the software that is a common good, right? Like if you're really being free open source, but like try to find a path to monetizing it because the free market is a much more efficient way to inform better decisions, right? Like that's what nature does, right? Like nature is like it's the most capitalist thing that there is, right? Like they will sort of like you'll tell the fish to go this direction, right? If you don't go the direction, you die. So I like, and I think we're seeing more of this now, where a lot of people who work in open source and even finding some grants as well. So there's a mix there. They're trying to find paths forward where it's a mixed source of funding. I think that's tremendously good.
I think. Sorry.
And listen, you actually made my second point because I was waiting to jump in with a second point, which was community. Like that's also what you're starting to touch on here. And what I wanted to note that if you see me like fiddling with phone, I'm just trying to involve our remote community that's also watching this stream. So if you have any questions, please post it in comments on the stream and I'll run them here by the guest. But the thing, NBK, that you're saying to me is exactly about how do you get that value from the community that's using your product. And that's where, to me, you're such a great example of a person that built community around the product, that built that network, and it has a set of skills that monetizes at the level at which you want to stay. Because to me, it seems you don't want to scale this company. No, exactly. But you have found the sweet spot, and you have the skills. This is where I see OpenSats and other organizations like that, where I invite like developers that do not have that set of skills to ask for grant from organization. And then when they get grant, maybe they get not just money, but mentorship on developing skill set or staying at the level where they're like, I just don't want to get $30 a year from my community, or I want to maybe find someone who is good at that.
I find that like oftentimes, especially people who are very good at code, there's a fear of making money, right? And there is this it's mostly because of fiat, right? There is this like horrible sort of like thing that came with the money, right? The money is dirty kind of thing somehow, right? But it's not. Like, money is freedom, right? Like, if you have more money, you have more freedom. And because of Bitcoin, we have like a more ethical money and this capacity of like receiving that money too without permission. And like now you can sort of be, and we see this a lot, especially security researchers, guy living in Ramallah, guy living in like India somewhere, like making sats, doing security pen testing, right? So there is a path, and like I always just try, like, I want to encourage people to like try to take that leap and charge for that product, right? Like, people can still use your software for free, but like charge for that product. There is a value add, right?
I mean, it's not just like fear of charging money. It's more, if you want to, from my perspective, it's like fear of losing yourself and changing your daily rhythm of being a developer to being more of a sales product person. So yeah, to me, it's more of like fear of losing yourself.
Find a co-founder.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I would
Yeah.
I would say on efficiency that free and open source is very efficient in that good ideas eventually rise to the top.
Oh, absolutely, it's a market.
Yeah, whereas the free market of capital can be very inefficient. Like how many failed startups you end up with, and how much capital fails.
FTX,
But no, but say failure.
So if you could,
is the market.
What I'm saying is, if you can marry both of those things together. So if you have a piece of software which is being developed by the free and open source community, which is then super useful because like people are developing it because they want to use it, right? And then you can offer services, then you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, where you haven't got centralized capital, where there's a few people just trying to second guess what people want. Like, there are people actively building, and the community then finds out.
It's just that there is not a single answer to every problem, right? So, if you're offering sort of Lightning hosted solutions, right? That is one thing, and the answer on how to monetize that will be different in each different scale as well, right? So you're going to have to dance around, right, to make that happen through time as you expand or shift. So like not being stuck on thinking that there's just one way of skinning a cat is very important.
Yeah, but it comes down to what I was saying is like raising funds, doing business operations. Like, it's a skill, and it's a skill. If you get into that game, you need to win. And what gets me really in Bitcoin, and not so much in Nostr, but really in Bitcoin, is, and operating systems before that, is how much free and open source software technology like was developed, and then it was just used, and the value was collected by people that hadn't anything to do with development of that technology.
I mean, but think about it, right? Like, we now have a shared commons that is monetized by definition, right? That's like Bitcoin. So we all have bags. So, we are more likely, just through the incentives, to put Bitcoin first, our companies second, right? Because if Bitcoin fails, like, it's not just my company fails, I fail. So it's completely different set of incentives.
Yeah,
right?
but again, look at the amount of value that was captured by people that didn't contribute like almost like anything to Bitcoin, and people that actually were bad for Bitcoin. Like FTX, how many billions of dollars of value was destroyed by people that were actually
but who's
betting
value,
against,
right? Like, it was the fiat people who lost money.
Well, it's not only fiat people that lost money. It's like people that, if it weren't for those crypto investors and whatnot, like some of that money would have flown into Bitcoin funds.
No, not necessarily. I mean, like, see, I remember I used to have the handle on Twitter, deterministic optimism.
Oh yeah,
right.
And then
so,
you became a pessimist.
No, I'm past that now, right? Like, it's like I moved on. Like, it's already happened. We're just sort of like laggards now. See, Bitcoin is binary, right? Like, it's either going to be the quadrillion dollar per coin, or it's going to be zero, right? So if you just have enough. Don't need to be a bull or anything like that, but if you just have enough confidence, right, that this technology is going to win, right, you can then stop focusing on that and sort of focus on adding value to the network, right? Because every cycle that happens, all your Bitcoin savings are worth more, right? So again, you don't have to focus on being a selfish actor, right? Like, you can still be a selfish actor in terms of like you want to be capitalized, right? But contributing back to the network like has this beautiful a loop where it makes you like wealthier.
I do think we need to help kickstart people way more than what you're kind of saying. I agree, but we need to like help kickstart people more because like, even recent example that pissed me off is like with Lightspark doing the whole universal money protocol, but just
See, I don't have a
stealing.
problem with that. It's like
Man,
everything is good for Bitcoin.
I have
Everything,
a huge problem
FTX was good for
because
Bitcoin.
I was thinking
I
recently.
have a huge problem because they just like took the protocol.
I was thinking how recently, like often we'll think of the shitcoins as being a testnet for Bitcoin, and then I was kind of thinking, does traditional finance see Bitcoin as a testnet for their thing?
Yeah.
And I think they probably do because things like Lightning and in eCash you could use them.
Let them do it. All
outside
they're
of
doing
Bitcoin.
is like it's like FTX, right? Like all they're doing is teaching the other 9 billion, the 8 billion people in the world, right, about Bitcoin. And if that is through losing money, that's another way of learning, right? But at the end, like you have no choice, right? Even if you've been burned, you still have to buy Bitcoin again because you're going to be left behind.
See, I agree with you to the point, but this is a company that raised 170 plus million, did their research and development that boiled down to like just taking what was developed in FOSS and not giving back anything to FOSS.
But
Like if they did that and they donated to like $1 million to 501c3,
Is Linux
like,
winning?
I would. What?
Would you say Linux is winning?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, like, that's the same model. I mean, like, you look at Fang, right? They make hundreds of millions of dollars out of Linux, right? And they don't actually contribute as much as they should, right? I mean, but the technology itself is winning. The difference is that the reason why we don't feel it is because we don't have a shared protocol, right, on Linux, right? Like, it's not like if Linux price goes up, we feel it. It's a little different. Like Bitcoin changed the dynamic because we're intrinsically linked to each other. Even the bad people have no choice but to have Bitcoin. And I feel like Nostr is the same way because we are in the same network.
Well, I mean, we should always separate Bitcoin and Nostr. I think that's important. Even though they do go together like bread and butter, of course. But
I mean, the CEO of Nostr is a Bitcoiner, so I think like
But wait, wait. Like, who is CEO of Nostr?
I mean, I have Nostr.com, so I am in fact the CEO.
Yes.
And in fact, we are all CEO of Nostr.
The real question is who's the CTO, because I have a few things I want to like tell him.
No, but I mean, when you talk about value, so I look at LM Bits and I think, if I were to pay to have that built, like just as a proprietary piece of software, there's probably like $10 million worth of software development which has gone into it so far to get it to where it is now. But all this stuff is, all these amazing free and open source contributors building stuff which they want to see exist. So the motivation is less so the pursuit of capital on their behalf, and more so that they want something to exist, or they want to experiment, or they want to be the first to build something. And I think that motivation, clearly, because we have this in the free and open source world, which a lot of the, our technology stacks now rely upon, is a real driving force. And there is a corrupting element to capital, which we need to be aware of when we take free and open source projects and we do capitalize them. And it's something there's so many examples now of how not to do it, like I mentioned before, that I think is a lot easier now to build private capital on free and open source.
Yeah, and one thing that open source projects to me are still it's underappreciated is development of the people involved with the open source project. Like when I look at LM Bits, like LM Bits team is phenomenal. Like you have Kali, you have DNI, Black Coffee. These are people that like world is a better place because they can spend their day focusing on building technology that is then freely available to everyone. Right?
But technology alone doesn't go anywhere, right? You need the entrepreneurs, right, who will then essentially productize things in a way that essentially all you're trying to do is find product market fit, right? Like people are not going to come because you have a great technology. Like that does nothing, right? Like it's amazing for us, like we're all nerds, but like like how do you get this to the hands of the 8 billion people, right? Like who want to benefit from this? It's like it is true products.
What I'm trying to say, like going beyond that, like this development of people. Like I remember Jack talking about what FOSS has done for him because he was following how Linux was developed, how like that's the thing that I think is always overlooked is like there are young developers right now in this audience watching the stream around the world that are better than any of us here, but they do not have the same level of access and they need 5 years to develop so that they spawn a new Nostr. Like when you look at Nostr and the way Nostr was developed, like Ben, when you added me to that Telegram channel, I was like, look at Fia, Jeff, and Ben, just what it is like wasting time, developing something. And then 2 years later, look at us. Like look where we are, like how much value was created. And that's the thing that since we're getting to time, like I do want to point out. And like I really believe, especially now OpenSats, what OpenSats is doing, like I think that kind of organization is a missing link. And beyond that, just making sure that organizations that take that and capture that value from the FOSS software, like give back. You're like Lightspark, you're not upset. I'm upset. I won't be upset once they donate to nonprofits.
Yeah, so there's always going to be leeches, right? There is a reason why Turing trackers used to have the ratio. There's always going to be leeches. You cannot prevent the leeches, right? There's ways to handle the leeches, like so they don't cause harm, but they're going to leech, right? You can't. That's just inherent part of humanity, right?
We can fight them a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we can make their life difficult, and that comes some pleasure from that. But we do have like awesome organizations. It's not just OpenSats. There's like HRF. There's Brink. There is more that I'm going to probably forget the name. Spiral. And they're all going to have their own take. And I find like the competition, even on the charitable side, is important too. And I think like they're all sort of doing ethical work, which is great. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we're winning. Like stuff is happening. People are happy. People are like funded. And I don't subscribe to there is no money for people to work on. Like there is. You have to move your ass and go find it.
Yeah, there is, and this is why I've been very impressed with OpenSats. And like I mentioned with the GG, example, there is an inherent danger when you have a big pot of money and then somebody allocating that money to projects that it then, like you say, can warp the landscape.
Yes.
And I think that it's very important to be mindful, and like you've done, like have a community group where you can federate decisions so that doesn't happen so much. And
corruption will slow down.
I think this is what the great thing about Bitcoin is.
Humans do that. Humans will corrupt any system, right? We are imperfect beings.
I remember when in that first Nostr in Costa Rica, and we were talking with Rabel, and he said one of the things we need to set up for Nostr is a foundation. And then instantly all the Bitcoiners went, no! But we have this amazing set of experiences
he didn't know about Bitcoin Foundation.
This protocol being centralized, Bitcoin, because there's this monetary value attached. And I think that's very healthy to carry those ideals and experiences into Nostr.
I think this level of adversarial thinking in this scale has never happened before. It really is it's a remarkable, everybody's paranoid about everything, but in a healthy way. It's constructive, right? And I think this is why, state actors look at this shit and they go nothing I can do about this. I'm not even gonna try because they're just gonna look stronger, right? Look what Trudeau did, right? We're gonna, you can't do it. Well, screw you.
We were talking about the space being infiltrated by, by spooks or whatever. The other day over for some
blacklisting.
Yeah, well, we were we're probably infiltrated, and there's probably some very wealthy spooks within Bitcoin and our communities that have been since the cypherpunks. But the reality is, there's not really anything they can do, which is amazing in itself. All they end up actually doing is kind of contributing.
But there is no admin keys.
No.
Right? That's the key. There's no corruptible person or group. Right? Bitcoin core devs could disappear tomorrow. It's okay. Like we're gonna still make it, right? Maybe the software won't be as good, but like it's still gonna go, right? And that's why this sort of ossification mindset of not making changes, not adding concentration of power in anything is so important, right? Because remaining uncorruptible by design is hard, and it's hard to maintain it that way.
Yeah, well, that diversity is definitely a strength, and since we're at the time, we start closing this discussion. Even though, like, I wish there was Q&A, and I think we're gonna do Q&A privately there, like especially tonight at 6 p.m. There is a Bitcoin meetup, but
Here.
here. I just want to close with the thoughts that if you are a developer with desire to get into FOSS, my biggest advice is like number one, find your community. Number two, find the point of contact in that community. You know, maybe you like MBK the most.
The first thing you should do is build something.
Oh, build something. Okay. Build something, then find the point of contact, whether it's Ben Arc.
I agree completely. I've noticed in the Bitcoin open source community, if you've attempted to build something, even if it's terrible, and you've attempted, and you can see that you've attempted to build it, and you go and then reach out to the community and say, oh, I need help with this thing. People are so welcoming.
Proof of work, man, trumps anything.
I mean, I'm the worst developer, but that's how I managed to get started. In
okay, you got me. See, this is why I hang out with these gentlemen. They make me better. So, like, step one, build something, and then step two, find that point of contact. And if it's Uncle, I'll be glad to be your point of contact. That's it for this panel. Thank you.
Thank you.